On the morning of September 7, 1997, the dawn in Albany, New York, revealed a scene that would haunt the city for decades. Three park workers arrived at Washington Park to begin their shift and found a small, dark shape left in the grass. Lying near this lake was an unresponsive newborn. The infant had been wrapped in blue cloth, set on fire, and abandoned in the dirt. With no leads and no identity for the child, the city of Albany took him in as their own. The community gave him the name Baby Moses, and despite being strangers to the victim, hundreds of residents gathered to hold a funeral for the child. While the city spent the next 27 years mourning a child they never knew, the killer moved on. They relied on the passage of time to let the physical evidence decay and the memory of the crime fade into a cold case. The investigation remained stalled until police turned to genetic genealogy. This is a forensic technique that takes an unidentified DNA profile and compares it against public ancestry databases to find partial genetic matches among the suspect's relatives. This process allows investigators to build out a massive family tree from the unidentified remains. By identifying distant relatives who have shared their data online, police can work backward through generations to narrow down the pool of potential parents. In this case, the genetic data systematically eliminated branch after branch of the family tree until the science pointed to one woman, 52-year-old Keri Mazzuca. On September 6, 2024, state troopers intercepted Keri in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. Her reaction to being taken in for questioning was jarringly mundane. She repeatedly asked if she could use her phone to tell her manager she would be late for work. The DNA provided the physical link, but it was only the first step. To secure a conviction for a 27-year-old crime, investigators now had to use the interrogation to bridge the gap between a genetic match and a full admission of guilt. Inside the Albany Police Department, detectives start with a strategic opening. They inform Keri about the DNA match to the remains found in the park, but omit the details about the fire and the condition of the body to see how much of the truth she is willing to volunteer. This is a test of a psychological defense called minimization. Guilty suspects often admit to a less serious version of the crime, like an accident, to protect their ego and gauge how much the police actually know. Keri quickly offers her first version of events. She admits to giving birth in her bathtub, but claims the infant accidentally drowned in the water. She tells the detectives that, in a state of panic, she drove to Washington Park and handed the deceased baby to a random stranger. The detective then reveals that the baby was found burned. This forces Keri to abandon her first story and adapt. She admits to setting the fire herself, but insists the child was already dead, attempting to frame the act as a desperate attempt to cover up a tragic accident. The interrogators use forensic facts to dismantle this defense. They point out that the autopsy showed no water in the baby's lungs, proving the drowning story was impossible. By removing her excuses, they force Keri to confront the physical evidence. The detective shifts the focus to the window of time between the birth and the baby's death. He presses Keri to account for the minutes the baby was alive and breathing, forcing her to explain exactly how that life ended. Keri eventually provides the final, horrific detail. She admits that she placed her hands over the newborn's mouth and nose and applied pressure until the child stopped moving. When asked how long she held her hand there, Keri's answer reveals the deliberation of the act. She maintained that lethal pressure for 10 minutes. She also clarifies why she used fire. It wasn't a product of panic, but a calculated effort to destroy any fingerprints or DNA she may have left on the towel wrapped around the infant. The interrogation succeeded by systematically closing every logical exit. By the end of the session, the detectives had moved Keri from a total denial of the crime to a detailed confession of intentional murder. Despite just confessing to killing her child, Keri's focus immediately shifts back to her own life. She asks the detectives if her confession will interfere with her plans to take a vacation to Florida in November. Following the confession, the police do something unexpected. Instead of placing her in a cell, they tell her she is free to go home. This was a tactical decision. While Keri was being questioned, investigators had hidden an eavesdropping device in her home to monitor her behavior after she left the high-pressure environment of the station. The audio captured at her house showed no signs of remorse or distress. Instead, Keri was heard casually vacuuming her floors, treating the day's events as though they were a minor disruption to her routine. This behavior demonstrates a total compartmentalization of violence. After 27 years of silence and a fresh confession to a homicide, Keri returned to a mundane domestic environment, prioritizing household chores over the gravity of her own admission. 1 week later, police returned to Keri's home to perform a formal arrest. She was charged with second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and concealment of a corpse. At the plea hearing, the prosecution detailed the suffering of the infant, who weighed over 9 pounds at birth. They ensured the court saw the victim not as a cold case, but as a child who experienced extreme pain at the hands of his mother. In 2025, Keri Mazzuca pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. The court sentenced her to 25 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervision after her release. During sentencing, the judge noted the contrast between Keri's apathy and the community's compassion. He stated that the detectives and the residents who named the child Baby Moses showed the infant more love than his own mother ever did. Modern science provided the data to find a killer, but it was the investigative strategy in the interrogation room that finally forced the truth into the open. After nearly 3 decades, the silence was broken, and the city finally secured justice for Baby Moses.